My name is Sherry Lawson, and at 27, I never thought my voice would matter. Working at the Wellness Foundation, I was used to staying quiet, following orders, and making others look good. But on that night, at our annual charity gala, when Amanda Jensen pointed her manicured finger at me and called me filthy and ungrateful in front of everyone who mattered in Chicago, something inside me finally broke free. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on my abuser, let me know where you are watching from and subscribe if you have ever felt silenced. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I never imagined I would one day be rubbing shoulders with Chicago's elite. My parents worked hard their entire lives, dad as a high school math teacher and mom as a nurse at the local hospital. They instilled in me the values of education, hard work, and giving back to the community. I took those lessons to heart, becoming the first in my family to attend college. I graduated with honors from the University of Illinois with a degree in public health. While my classmates chased corporate jobs with six-figure salaries, I pursued my passion for nonprofit work. I wanted to make a meaningful change in the world and help those who needed healthcare but couldn't afford it. That idealism led me to what I thought was my dream job at the prestigious Wellness Foundation in Chicago 3 years ago. When I received the job offer, I could barely contain my excitement. The Wellness Foundation was known nationwide for its innovative approaches to healthcare accessibility. They funded community clinics in underserved areas, launched mobile health units, and advocated for policy changes at both state and federal levels. Working there meant I could help shape programs that would improve thousands of lives. My modest one-bedroom apartment in Logan Square was a far cry from the luxurious condos and lakefront properties my colleagues called home, but I didn't mind. I decorated it with secondhand furniture, colorful throw pillows from discount stores, and plants that thrived despite my occasional neglect. It was cozy, it was mine, and most importantly, it was within my budget while I paid off student loans. Looking back, I can see how my people-pleasing tendencies set me up for what was to come. As the middle child between two strong-willed siblings, I had always been the peacekeeper in my family. I learned early to anticipate needs, smooth over conflicts, and put others first. These traits made me excellent at community outreach, but vulnerable to those who would take advantage of my desire for approval. Amanda Jensen was everything I aspired to be professionally. With an MBA from Northwestern, she had transformed the Wellness Foundation from a small, local charity into a powerhouse nonprofit with national recognition. Her name appeared regularly in the Chicago Business Journal, and she sat on boards of multiple organizations. At 42, she commanded attention in every room she entered. I still remember our first meeting during my job interview. Amanda arrived 10 minutes late, apologizing about an emergency call with a major donor. Even in that brief excuse, she was establishing her importance. She wore a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her blonde hair cut in a sharp bob that framed her face perfectly. When she smiled, her teeth gleamed impossibly white against her pink lipstick. "So, you're the one with the innovative community engagement strategies?" she said, scanning my resume. "Tell me how you would approach our South Side initiative." For the next 15 minutes, I outlined my ideas for partnering with local churches and community centers to build trust in neighborhoods historically suspicious of outside organizations. Amanda nodded along, occasionally making notes. When I finished, she leaned forward. "That's exactly the fresh thinking we need, Sherry. Most people come in here talking about metrics and outcomes without understanding the human element. I think you might be a perfect fit for our team." That moment of validation from someone I admired so deeply sealed my fate. I would have walked through fire to earn her continued approval. The Wellness Foundation occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming glass tower in downtown Chicago. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of Lake Michigan. The reception area featured modern furniture in calming blues and greens, with the foundation's logo, a stylized lotus flower, prominently displayed behind the desk. Everything about the space communicated success and professionalism. Behind the pristine surface lay an intensely competitive culture. Our annual fundraising target of $5 million created constant pressure. Every interaction with donors was choreographed for maximum impact. Every program needed quantifiable results to justify continued funding. Public image was paramount, and Amanda was masterful at maintaining it. During my first month, I met the key players who would feature prominently in my story. Jordan Taylor, our marketing specialist, was in his mid-30s with kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He spoke quietly but precisely, and I noticed he was one of the few people who seemed unintimidated by Amanda. Dominic Pierce was Amanda's favorite. Tall, conventionally handsome, and always impeccably dressed, he headed our corporate partnership division. He had a way of appearing deeply engaged in conversations while revealing nothing about himself. I would later discover his talent for taking credit for others' work and deflecting blame for his own mistakes. Tanya Wilson, from HR, maintained a nervous energy whenever Amanda was nearby. She processed paperwork efficiently but seemed reluctant to address any concerns involving leadership. Dr. Martin Shaw, our board chairman, was a distinguished cardiologist in his 60s who deferred to Amanda on most operational decisions, trusting her judgment implicitly. Then there were our key donors, the Blackwell family, who had made their fortune in real estate, the Harrises, who owned a chain of luxury hotels, and Senator Williams, whose support lent political legitimacy to our healthcare initiatives. These were the people we needed to impress, the ones whose checks kept our programs running. The foundation described its culture as collaborative excellence, but the reality was far more cutthroat. Weekly team meetings felt like subtle competitions, where each department head tried to outshine the others. Success was celebrated publicly, but always with the understanding that next quarter's goals would be even higher. Amanda took a special interest in me from the beginning. She called it mentorship, inviting me to late-night strategy sessions in her corner office. "I see something special in you, Sherry," she would say, pouring herself a glass of expensive whiskey that she never offered to share. "Not everyone has the instinct for this work. I can help you develop it if you're willing to learn." Those sessions could last until 9 or 10 at night. Amanda would share insights about our donors' preferences, explain unwritten rules of foundation politics, and occasionally reveal confidential information about other employees. Between us, Jordan is brilliant at marketing, but lacks ambition. Such a waste. Or Dominic. He talks a good game, but he needs constant direction. Remember that when he tries to take charge of joint projects. I soaked up every word, flattered by her attention and eager to prove myself worthy of it. When she asked me to take on additional projects, I accepted without hesitation. When she suggested I attend weekend charity events to network with donors, I rearranged my personal plans. Each small success earned a nod of approval that felt more valuable than any formal recognition. "The grant proposal you helped with secured $50,000, she announced during one team meeting. "This is what happens when talented people collaborate effectively." The fact that I had written 90% of the proposal while Amanda contributed minor edits didn't matter. I was part of her success story, and at the time, that seemed enough. The first criticisms came so subtly, I barely recognized them as red flags. We were preparing for a meeting with hospital administrators when Amanda glanced at my navy blazer and pencil skirt. "That outfit is fine for internal meetings, but for external partners, you might want to invest in something more polished. First impressions matter in this business." She said it with a smile that suggested she was doing me a favor. Soon, these helpful suggestions extended beyond my wardrobe. My hairstyle was a bit casual for executive meetings. My makeup could be more professional. Even my speaking style needed refinement, apparently. I said too often and should practice eliminating it. After presentations, Amanda would offer feedback that left me confused about whether I had succeeded or failed. "Good effort on the proposal, Sherry. Next time, try to be more concise while also providing more supporting data." How could I be both more concise and more detailed? I would spend hours agonizing over such contradictory guidance. Her instructions became increasingly vague, yet her expectations remained precise. "I need you to take the community engagement plan to the next level," she would say, without specifying what next level meant. When I presented my revised work, she frowned slightly. This isn't quite what I had in mind. But what she had in mind was never clearly articulated until I had failed to meet the invisible target. I began working weekends, trying different approaches until I found one that earned her approval. I started doubting my own competence, despite having excelled throughout my education and early career. Maybe I wasn't as good as I thought. Maybe I needed to try harder. The financial inconsistencies began around this time too. Small expenses for work-related events would be questioned or denied reimbursement. The foundation can't cover personal development costs, Amanda would say about a healthcare policy conference she had explicitly told me to attend. I started paying for professional expenses out of my own pocket rather than face her disapproval. My first experience with public humiliation came 6 months into the job. We were hosting a luncheon for potential donors, and I had been asked to present our community outreach strategy. I had prepared for weeks, gathering data from successful programs and creating clear visual aids. As I began speaking, I felt confident and passionate about our work. 3 minutes into my presentation, Amanda interrupted. What Sherry means to say is that our approach is evidence-based and targeted. It was exactly what I had just said, but she repeated it as if clarifying something complex. Throughout the 20-minute presentation, she interrupted 8 more times, each intervention subtly undermining my authority. I noticed the uncomfortable glances exchanged between donors. One woman checked her watch repeatedly. A hospital administrator who had seemed engaged at the start was now scrolling through his phone. I was losing them, and I couldn't regain momentum with Amanda's constant interruptions. After the luncheon, she pulled me aside. "I had to step in because you weren't connecting with the audience," she explained. "These people respond to confidence and authority. Your delivery was too hesitant." The fact that any hesitation came after her interruptions went unmentioned. "I'm sorry," I said automatically, though a small voice inside questioned what I was apologizing for. "I'll do better next time." As I gathered my materials, Jordan approached. "Hey, great data on the Southside Clinic outcomes," he said quietly. "That 2 to 100% increase in diabetes screenings is impressive." His words were normal, but his eyes conveyed something else, recognition of what had just happened. He gave me a slight nod before walking away, leaving me to wonder if I had imagined the moment of solidarity. Over the next few months, the demands increased while recognition diminished. Amanda assigned me to lead a major grant proposal for federal funding with an impossible 2-week deadline. I worked until midnight most nights, fueled by coffee and determination. The scope kept expanding as Amanda added requirements. "We also need a full budget projection for 5 years," or "include case studies from similar programs nationwide." Meanwhile, I was taking on responsibilities that rightfully belonged to Dominic's team. "He's overloaded with the hospital partnerships," Amanda explained. "Just help out temporarily." The temporary arrangement showed no signs of ending, and soon I was managing projects for both departments. Amanda's text messages arrived at all hours: early mornings, late nights, weekends. Each one carried an implicit expectation of immediate response. "Thoughts on the Williams proposal?" at 6 in the morning. "Need the clinic statistics revised by tomorrow," at 11 on a Saturday night. My personal time evaporated. When the federal grant proposal was finally complete, 300 pages of meticulously researched strategies, budgets, and evaluation methods, Amanda presented it to the board without me present. At the celebration party afterward, she accepted congratulations while I stood in the background, introduced to key stakeholders only as one of our team members who helped with research. My body began sending warning signals my mind wasn't ready to acknowledge. I developed insomnia, lying awake replaying conversations and second-guessing decisions. Stomach pains became so common, I kept antacids in every bag and drawer. Anxiety attacks struck before meetings, my heart racing as I struggled to catch my breath in bathroom stalls.
Meeting Grace Williams happened purely by chance. I was working on a Saturday at a coffee shop near my apartment when someone called my name. I looked up to see a woman about my age with curly hair and a hesitant smile. "You're Sherry, right? From the Wellness Foundation." I nodded, trying to place her. "I'm Grace. I used to work there. Left about a year ago. Community Programs Coordinator." We chatted about general foundation news until I mentioned working closely with Amanda on several major initiatives. Grace's smile faltered, and she stirred her coffee with unusual intensity. "So, you're her new—" She paused, searching for words. "Protégé." When I confirmed this, Grace looked genuinely concerned. "Just be careful, okay? Amanda has patterns. What she does to rising stars—" She stopped herself. "I shouldn't say more. You probably think she's amazing." "She's challenging, but brilliant," I said defensively. "I'm learning so much." Grace nodded too quickly. "That's exactly what I said too. For about a year." She wrote her number on a napkin. "If you ever want to talk about anything, call me." I tucked the napkin into my wallet, but dismissed her warnings as sour grapes. When she asked me to take on additional projects, I accepted without hesitation. When she suggested I attend weekend charity events to network with donors, I rearranged my personal plans. Each small success earned a nod of approval that felt more valuable than any formal recognition. "The grant proposal you helped with secured $50,000, she announced during one team meeting. "This is what happens when talented people collaborate effectively." The fact that I had written 90% of the proposal while Amanda contributed only minor edits didn't matter. I was part of her success story, and at the time, that seemed enough. The first criticisms came so subtly, I barely recognized them as red flags. We were preparing for a meeting with hospital administrators when Amanda glanced at my navy blazer and pencil skirt. That outfit is fine for internal meetings, but for external partners, you might want to invest in something more polished. First impressions matter in this business. She said it with a smile that suggested she was doing me a favor. Soon, these helpful suggestions extended beyond my wardrobe. My hairstyle was a bit casual for executive meetings. My makeup could be more professional. Even my speaking style needed refinement, apparently. I said too often and should practice eliminating it.
After presentations, Amanda would offer feedback that left me confused about whether I had succeeded or failed. "Good effort on the proposal, Sherry. Next time, try to be more concise while also providing more supporting data." How could I be both more concise and more detailed? I would spend hours agonizing over such contradictory guidance. Her instructions became increasingly vague, yet her expectations remained precise. "I need you to take the community engagement plan to the next level," she would say, without specifying what next level meant. When I presented my revised work, she would frown slightly. This isn't quite what I had in mind. But what she had in mind was never clearly articulated until I had failed to meet the invisible target. I began working weekends, trying different approaches, until I found one that earned her approval. I started doubting my own competence, despite having excelled throughout my education and early career. Maybe I wasn't as good as I thought. Maybe I needed to try harder. The financial inconsistencies began around this time, too. Small expenses for work-related events would be questioned or denied reimbursement. "The foundation can't cover personal development costs," Amanda would say about a healthcare policy conference she had explicitly told me to attend. I started paying for professional expenses out of my own pocket rather than face her disapproval. My first experience with public humiliation came 6 months into the job. We were hosting a luncheon for potential donors, and I had been asked to present our community outreach strategy. I had prepared for weeks, gathering data from successful programs and creating clear visual aids. As I began speaking, I felt confident and passionate about our work. 3 minutes into my presentation, Amanda interrupted. "What Sherry means to say is that our approach is evidence-based and targeted." It was exactly what I had just said, but she repeated it as if clarifying something complex.
Throughout the 20-minute presentation, she interrupted 8 more times, each intervention subtly undermining my authority. I noticed the uncomfortable glances exchanged between donors. One woman checked her watch repeatedly. A hospital administrator, who had seemed engaged at the start, was now scrolling through his phone. I was losing them, and I couldn't regain momentum with Amanda's constant interruptions. After the luncheon, she pulled me aside. "I had to step in because you weren't connecting with the audience," she explained. "These people respond to confidence and authority. Your delivery was too hesitant." The fact that any hesitation came after her interruptions went unmentioned. "I'm sorry," I said automatically, though a small voice inside questioned what I was apologizing for. "I'll do better next time." As I gathered my materials, Jordan approached. "Hey, great data on the Southside Clinic outcomes," he said quietly. "That 2 to 100% increase in diabetes screenings is impressive." His words were normal, but his eyes conveyed something else, recognition of what had just happened. He gave me a slight nod before walking away, leaving me to wonder if I had imagined the moment of solidarity. Over the next few months, the demands increased while recognition diminished. Amanda assigned me to lead a major grant proposal for federal funding with an impossible 2-week deadline. I worked until midnight most nights, fueled by coffee and determination. The scope kept expanding as Amanda added requirements. "We also need a full budget projection for 5 years, or include case studies from similar programs nationwide." Meanwhile, I was taking on responsibilities that rightfully belonged to Dominic's team. "He's overloaded with the hospital partnerships," Amanda explained. "Just help out temporarily." The temporary arrangement showed no signs of ending, and soon I was managing projects for both departments. Amanda's text messages arrived at all hours: early mornings, late nights, weekends. Each one carried an implicit expectation of immediate response. "Thoughts on the Williams proposal?" at 6 in the morning. "Need the clinic statistics revised by tomorrow," at 11 on a Saturday night. My personal time evaporated. When the federal grant proposal was finally complete, 300 pages of meticulously researched strategies, budgets, and evaluation methods, Amanda presented it to the board without me present. At the celebration party afterward, she accepted congratulations while I stood in the background, introduced to key stakeholders only as one of our team members who helped with research. My body began sending warning signals my mind wasn't ready to acknowledge. I developed insomnia, lying awake replaying conversations and second-guessing decisions. Stomach pains became so common I kept antacids in every bag and drawer. Anxiety attacks struck before meetings, my heart racing as I struggled to catch my breath in bathroom stalls. Meeting Grace Williams happened purely by chance. I was working on a Saturday at a coffee shop near my apartment when someone called my name. I looked up to see a woman about my age with curly hair and a hesitant smile. "You're Sherry, right? From the Wellness Foundation." I nodded, trying to place her. "I'm Grace. I used to work there. Left about a year ago. Community Programs Coordinator." We chatted about general foundation news until I mentioned working closely with Amanda on several major initiatives. Grace's smile faltered and she stirred her coffee with unusual intensity. "So you're her new..." She paused, searching for words. "Protégé." When I confirmed this, Grace looked genuinely concerned. "Just be careful, okay? Amanda has patterns. What she does to rising stars..." She stopped herself. "I shouldn't say more. You probably think she's amazing." "She's challenging, but brilliant," I said defensively. "I'm learning so much." Grace nodded too quickly. "That's exactly what I said too. For about a year." She wrote her number on a napkin. "If you ever want to talk about anything, call me." I tucked the napkin into my wallet, but dismissed her warnings as sour grapes. Clearly, Grace couldn't handle Amanda's high standards and had left on bad terms. I believed I was different. I could prove myself worthy. Yet her words planted a seed of doubt I couldn't entirely ignore. As I walked home, I reflected on the similarities between her vague warnings and my own experiences. The seed would take time to germinate, but it had already found fertile ground. The Healthcare Access Initiative was my brainchild, the project I was most proud of at the foundation. I had spent months developing a comprehensive model that partnered with community organizations to reach people who typically avoided medical settings. The 80-page proposal detailed innovative ways to build trust, provide culturally sensitive care, and track outcomes meaningfully. When Amanda asked for the final draft to review, I gladly provided it. 2 days later, I discovered through the Foundation newsletter that Amanda had presented her groundbreaking healthcare access initiative to the board and local press. My name appeared nowhere in the article. The next morning brought another shock. Amanda had been nominated for a Civic Leadership Award based on the initiative. The nomination highlighted the very elements I had researched and developed, quoting Amanda directly on concepts she had initially questioned when I proposed them. I sat at my desk staring at the announcement, a hollow feeling spreading through my chest. This wasn't a minor instance of shared credit or a simple oversight.
This was a deliberate erasure of my contribution to a project I had poured my heart into. "It's not right," Jordan said, stopping by my desk with a coffee. He placed it beside my keyboard and leaned against the wall, keeping his voice low. "Everyone who worked on the initiative knows whose idea it was." "Does it matter what everyone knows if Amanda controls the narrative?" I asked. Jordan considered this. "Documentation matters. Emails, meeting notes, draft versions, they tell the real story. Just something to keep in mind." His advice resonated with me. That evening, I created a folder on my personal computer labeled Project Contributions and began saving emails, draft documents with tracked changes, and meeting notes. I wasn't sure what I would do with this evidence, but having it provided some comfort. The isolation tactics began subtly. In team meetings, Amanda would mention, "Let's not overburden Sherry with collaborative projects right now. She's focusing on some challenging assignments." It sounded considerate until I realized I was being systematically excluded from important work. Comments to colleagues planted seeds of doubt about my competence. "Sherry's still getting up to speed on foundation procedures," she would say within my earshot, though I had been there for over a year. Or, "The donor outreach materials need a careful review. Sherry's draft had some concerning gaps." My calendar became a battlefield of last-minute changes. Meetings I should attend would be rescheduled without my knowledge. "Oh, didn't Tanya tell you we moved that to yesterday?" Amanda would ask with feigned concern when I arrived prepared for a discussion that had already occurred. Team lunches and happy hours happened without me. I would hear about them afterward. "The appetizers at Gibson's were amazing," someone would say, followed by apologetic explanations. "We thought you were swamped with the grant deadline," or "It was very last minute." The distance between me and most colleagues grew as Amanda's narrative about my performance took root. People who had once eagerly collaborated now sent formal emails instead of stopping by my desk. In meetings, my suggestions received polite nods, but no real consideration. Only Jordan maintained regular contact, finding reasons to touch base about marketing materials or communication strategies. Even these interactions carried risk for him. I noticed Amanda watching with narrowed eyes when we chatted in the break room. The gaslighting intensified to the point where I began doubting my own memory and perception. Amanda would send clear email instructions, prepare a one-page executive summary with no graphics, only to claim different directions when I delivered exactly what she'd requested. I specifically asked for visual elements to make it engaging, she would insist, scrolling through her phone as if looking for the email. But we can use this as a starting point. When I checked the original email later, I would find I had followed her instructions precisely. Verbal directions contradicted written ones, creating impossible standards. In a meeting, she would say, "Focus on qualitative outcomes for the Harris proposal." But her follow-up email would specify, "Ensure the Harris proposal emphasizes quantitative metrics above all." No matter which approach I took, I had misunderstood her intentions. "I never said that" became a phrase I heard regularly, even when others had witnessed the conversation. Amanda would reshape reality with such conviction that sometimes I questioned whether I had imagined or misheard her original words. Projects would suddenly become urgent priorities that apparently had been mentioned weeks ago. "As I explained in early June, the board needs this report by tomorrow,"
she would say in late July, though no such conversation had occurred. I would work through the night to meet these fabricated deadlines, too exhausted to challenge the false narrative. The constant second-guessing took its toll. I started recording meetings on my phone and keeping a detailed log of every interaction with Amanda. The evidence of discrepancies provided some validation that I wasn't imagining things, but it did little to protect me from the ongoing psychological warfare. The full picture came into focus during a late-night conversation with Jordan after a particularly difficult day. Amanda had publicly praised Dominic for a presentation based entirely on my research, then criticized my lack of initiative in the same meeting. "You know you're not the first, right?" Jordan said, as we sat in a quiet corner of a nearby bar. "This is what she does." "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Jordan sighed. "There's a pattern. Amanda finds promising women, especially ones who remind her of a younger version of herself. She mentors them intensively, builds them up, then systematically tears them down and takes credit for their work. Eventually, they quit, transfer, or get fired for performance issues. Then she finds someone new. But why? What does she gain? Control. Recognition. She eliminates potential competition while enhancing her own reputation." Jordan glanced around before continuing. "Grace Williams was before you. Before her was Melissa Chen, then Andrea Thompson. Always women with potential. Always the same pattern." That night, I researched Amanda's professional history. Online reviews of the foundation mentioned high turnover in certain positions. LinkedIn profiles showed a pattern of women leaving after 12 to 18 months working closely with Amanda. Social media comments on foundation posts occasionally referenced toxic leadership before being deleted. Over the next week, I connected with 2 more former employees whose experiences mirrored mine with unsettling similarity. The same initial mentorship, the same escalating criticism, the same public humiliation, the same theft of credit. The pattern was undeniable, and I was its latest victim. As the annual charity gala approached, the pressure intensified. This event was crucial to achieving our $5 million fundraising goal. Every detail had to be perfect, every donor carefully primed to open their checkbooks. Amanda assigned me to create the keynote presentation and impact report that would showcase our achievements and inspire continued support. For 3 weeks, I worked 14-hour days preparing materials, researching statistics, gathering testimonials, and designing visuals. With each draft I submitted, Amanda's criticism grew more cutting. "This lacks vision," she would say, without specifics. Or, "The donor perspective is completely missing here," without explaining what perspective she meant. 2 days before the event, I learned my presentation time had been cut from 15 minutes to 5. Yet the expected content remained the same. Then the morning before the gala, Amanda informed me that Dominic would be delivering the presentation I had created. "He has a more polished speaking style for this audience. You'll still be acknowledged in the program." When I reviewed the final slides, I discovered that key impact statistics had been removed, specifically data showing the success of programs I had developed. The narrative had been reshaped to highlight initiatives under Dominic's purview. That evening, I packed a small folder with backup documentation, the original slides, impact data, and emails confirming my role in the projects. I wasn't sure what I would do with them, but something told me to be prepared. It was a decision that would change everything.
The foundation's lotus logo appeared on everything from napkins to the massive ice sculpture beside the bar. At $10,000 per table, the event catered to Chicago's wealthiest and most influential citizens. I arrived early wearing a simple black dress I had splurged on at Nordstrom's semi-annual sale. It had cost half my monthly rent, but I knew appearance mattered tonight. Still, my outfit paled in comparison to the designer gowns and custom tuxedos that soon filled the room. From my position near the entrance, I watched 300 of Chicago's elite arrive, board members in conversation with hospital executives, major donors greeting each other like old friends, local celebrities whose presence would be featured in tomorrow's society pages. Senator Williams made a grand entrance, flanked by aides, while 3 city council members clustered near the champagne fountain.
Amanda worked the room with practiced precision, her red designer gown making her impossible to miss. She moved from group to group, laughing at the right moments, lightly touching arms for emphasis, creating the illusion of intimate connection with each person. Dr. Shaw followed in her wake, nodding approvingly as she charmed potential donors. I tried to focus on last-minute preparations, but my stomach knotted with each glance at the revised presentation. The missing statistics weren't just numbers. They represented real people helped by programs I had fought to implement. Their stories deserved to be told. 30 minutes before the program was scheduled to begin, Amanda approached with a tablet in hand. "We need to make some changes to the slides," she announced, her voice tight with irritation. "The flow isn't working, and the font size is inconsistent on slides 4 through 12. I took the tablet and saw her annotations, extensive revisions that would take hours, not minutes, to implement. "The program starts in half an hour," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Then I suggest you work quickly." She turned to Dominic, who stood nearby practicing his delivery. "Make sure you review the changes before you go on." I hurried to a small office behind the stage where I had set up a laptop connected to the presentation system. My hands shook slightly as I opened the files and began implementing Amanda's changes, reducing content on some slides, completely reworking others, all while trying to preserve at least some of the impact data. Jordan found me there 15 minutes later, hunched over the computer. "Need help?" he asked, closing the door behind him. "She wants the entire middle section restructured," I said, not looking up. "And the community clinic statistics are still missing." "Here," Jordan said, pulling up a chair. "I'll revise the layout while you focus on the content. We can get through more that way." With his help, I managed to incorporate most of Amanda's demands while subtly reinserting some of the key statistics she had removed. Not all of them, but enough to give an honest picture of our work. As we finalized the changes, I made a decision. I couldn't let the missing community impact data go unaddressed. These numbers represented our most successful programs serving people who were typically overlooked. Their stories deserve to be told, and the donors deserve to know the full impact of their contributions. With 5 minutes until the program began, I saved the revised presentation and headed toward the ballroom. My heart pounded as I spotted Amanda near the Blackwell family's table, champagne flute in hand, as she laughed at something Mr. Blackwell had said. I approached carefully, waiting for a natural pause in the conversation before speaking. "Amanda, could I have a quick word about the presentation?" I kept my voice low and professional. She turned slightly, her smile remaining fixed, though her eyes hardened. "Can it wait? I'm in the middle of something important. It's about the community impact data. The statistics for the Southside clinics are still missing from the slides. Those numbers would really impress the donors. 300% increase in preventative screenings, 60% reduction in emergency room visits." Amanda's expression shifted so suddenly, it was like watching a mask slip. Her smile vanished, replaced with a cold fury that made me step back involuntarily. When she spoke, her voice was loud enough to silence conversations at nearby tables. "She's filthy, she's ungrateful." The words cut through the ambient chatter, drawing all eyes to our corner of the room. "After everything I've done for her?" The silence that followed was absolute. 300 people froze, glasses midway to lips, conversations abandoned mid-sentence. Amanda continued, her voice echoing in the quiet ballroom. "I have spent countless hours trying to mentor you, to shape you into a professional, and this is how you repay me? By questioning my judgment in front of our donors?" She gestured dramatically at the Blackwell family, who looked deeply uncomfortable. "Do you have any idea how many mistakes of yours I've had to fix? How many times I've covered for your incompetence?" My face burned with humiliation. I could feel everyone staring. Board members, donors, colleagues, press. The room seemed to spin slightly as tunnel vision set in, my awareness narrowing to Amanda's furious face and the weight of hundreds of eyes upon me. I had never felt so exposed, so utterly stripped of dignity. It was as if I stood naked before the crowd. "Every instinct skills are lacking. You can't even dress appropriately for events of this caliber." She turned to Dr. Shaw. This is exactly what I was telling you about her performance issues. Dr. Shaw's expression was pained, but he made no move to intervene. No one did. The powerful room full of influential people watched in uncomfortable silence as a woman abused her position of power, and not one person stepped forward. In that frozen moment, something remarkable happened within me. Time seemed to slow as my mind rapidly processed the events of the past year. I saw with perfect clarity how each incident connected to form Amanda's pattern of behavior. Grace's warnings echoed in my memory. Amanda has patterns, what she does to rising stars. I realized with sudden certainty that if I left the foundation, Amanda would simply find another victim. The cycle would continue. Another hopeful young professional would be built up, torn down, and discarded. My humiliation would be repeated in another form, with another person standing where I now stood. The recognition shifted something fundamental inside me. The shame and embarrassment I felt transformed into something entirely different, a calm, righteous anger and determination. I felt a physical sensation like glass breaking inside my chest as something that had been constrained suddenly broke free. In that moment of clarity, I made a decision. I would respond not with emotion that could be dismissed, but with dignity and truth that could not be denied. I would use my voice not just for myself, but for Grace in Andrea and Melissa and anyone else who had stood in this same position of powerlessness. I took a deep breath and stepped forward while everyone watched. The folder of documentation felt heavy in my hands, but my spirit felt lighter than it had in months. I had found my voice and I was ready to use it. The silence following Amanda's outburst was deafening. Into that vacuum, I spoke with a calmness that surprised even me. I apologized to everyone for this disruption to what should be a celebratory evening. I began, my voice steady, despite my racing heart.
I understand you came here to support the important work of the Wellness Foundation, not to witness workplace drama. Amanda's lips curved into a dismissive smile, clearly expecting me to slink away in shame. Instead, I continued. Since Ms. Jensen has chosen to publicly question my competence and gratitude, I feel compelled to address these accusations with facts rather than emotion. I opened the folder I had brought, removing several printed emails and presentation drafts. The community impact data I was asking about shows a 300% increase in preventative care access and a 60% reduction in emergency room visits in underserved communities. These statistics were in the original presentation I created, but were removed in the final version. I held up the documents where anyone nearby could see the tracked changes and Amanda's initials on the edits. I have here the original draft with these statistics, along with Ms. Jensen's instructions to remove them, dated yesterday at 3:42 p.m. The confidence in Amanda's expression flickered slightly. She hadn't expected evidence. As for my supposed ingratitude, I continued, I have always acknowledged Ms. Jensen's leadership in my 3 years at the foundation. What I cannot accept is the systematic erasure of contributions from myself and others to projects that have genuinely helped our community. Amanda stepped forward, attempting to reclaim control. This is hardly the time or place. I agree completely, I interrupted gently, which is why I tried to address this privately before you chose to call me filthy and ungrateful loudly enough for the entire room to hear. Several donors shifted uncomfortably, their expressions suggesting they found Amanda's behavior distasteful. I noticed Mrs. Blackwell whispering something to her husband, who nodded bravely. What matters tonight isn't my feelings, or even this particular incident, I said, looking around the room. What matters is the life-changing work this foundation does when operating with integrity. The Southside Clinic program that was just excluded from tonight's presentation has helped over 2,000 families access healthcare they couldn't otherwise afford. That success deserves recognition regardless of who led the initiative. I turned slightly, addressing the broader audience rather than just Amanda. I've been privileged to work with dedicated healthcare providers, community organizers, and foundation staff who truly believe in our mission.
Their efforts should be celebrated, not hidden because they don't fit a particular narrative. As I spoke, I noticed Jordan moving closer. He cleared his throat before adding his voice to mine. The timeline and attribution Sherry describes is accurate. I worked directly on the marketing materials for these programs and can confirm that the community impact statistics are both accurate and impressive. They represent some of our most successful work this year. Amanda's face flushed with anger. Jordan, this is completely inappropriate. What's inappropriate is taking credit for others' work and then publicly humiliating them when they speak up, came a new voice from the entrance to the ballroom. Heads turned to see Grace Williams walking toward us, elegant in a simple blue dress. She must have heard about the confrontation through foundation staff who were witnessing everything unfold. I'm Grace Williams, former community programs coordinator. She introduced herself to the room at large. I left the foundation last year after experiencing exactly what you're witnessing tonight. It wasn't an isolated incident then, and it's clearly not an isolated incident now. Two current employees I hadn't expected to have the courage to speak nodded visibly, one even raising her hand slightly as if to be counted among those who recognized the pattern. Amanda's composure began to crack. This is ridiculous. We have disgruntled former employees crashing our event to spread lies. Are they lies, Amanda? Or is there a pattern here that's becoming increasingly difficult to deny? Dr. Shaw was watching intently, his expression shifting from discomfort to concern as more voices joined the conversation. Even Dominic had stepped away from Amanda, positioning himself closer to board members as if to distance himself from the unfolding situation. Amanda attempted to regain control, her voice taking on the authoritative tone that had intimidated so many for so long. We have a program to complete and donors who came here to support our mission, not listen to personnel grievances. This disruption is unprofessional and needs to end immediately. When no one moved to enforce her directive, something shifted in her demeanor. Her next words revealed more than she intended. This is absurd. I've devoted years to building this foundation's reputation only to have ungrateful girls who don't know their place try to undermine me with petty complaints. The phrase, ungrateful girls who don't know their place, hung in the air, revealing the gendered nature of her behavior that many had suspected but never heard so explicitly confirmed. Sherry, you need to leave now. Amanda pointed toward the exit, expecting the same compliance she had always commanded. But the power dynamic had shifted. No security personnel moved to escort me out. No colleague stepped forward to support her demand. Instead, people watched with increased interest as the truth continued to unfold. Senator Williams, who had been observing quietly, raised an eyebrow at Amanda's choice of words. Mrs. Harris, one of our major donors, crossed her arms and whispered something to her husband that made him frown deeply. Dr. Shaw finally stepped forward, raising a hand that silenced Amanda's next attempt to speak. I think we need to address these concerns properly. Amanda, Sherry, board members, let's move this discussion to a private room. Amanda tried to pull him aside. Martin, we have a program to complete. This can wait until tomorrow. He ignored her, addressing the room instead. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy your dinner. We'll resume the program shortly after we address this matter. His tone made it clear this wasn't optional. Amanda's insistence on continuing the gala program fell on dead ears. The physical rearrangement of the room made the power shift visible to everyone. Donors who had previously clustered around Amanda now approached me with quiet words of support. That took courage, Mrs. Blackwell murmured as I gathered my documents. The foundation needs more of that, not less. Jordan placed a supportive hand on my shoulder as we walked toward the meeting room. You okay? He asked quietly. I wasn't sure how to answer. The vindication didn't feel like triumph. The relief was tempered by lingering fear. I had spoken truth to power, but the consequences remained uncertain. What I knew with absolute certainty was that everything had changed in those few minutes. Amanda's carefully constructed image had cracked, revealing the reality beneath.
The truth had shifted the balance of power, and there would be no going back to the way things were before. As we entered the conference room, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride in finding my voice, anxiety about the outcome, and a profound sense that regardless of what happened next, I had reclaimed something essential that Amanda had nearly taken from me: my dignity and my truth. The private conference room felt unusually small, with 10 people inside. Amanda sat rigidly at one end of the table, while I took a seat at the other. Board members filled the chairs between us, with Dr. Shaw at the center. The tension was palpable as he called the impromptu meeting to order. "I want to understand exactly what's happening here," Dr. Shaw began, his tone measured. "Sherry, please explain your concerns specifically and with evidence." For the next 20 minutes, I presented my documentation chronologically: emails showing my original work and Amanda's subsequent claiming of credit, meeting notes revealing patterns of isolation tactics, and specific examples of gaslighting behavior. I spoke factually without emotional embellishment, letting the evidence tell its own story. Amanda interrupted repeatedly, attempting to reframe each incident as a misunderstanding. "Sherry clearly misinterpreted mentorship as criticism," she insisted. "In leadership positions, we sometimes have to make difficult decisions about who presents to donors or leads projects. That's not theft of credit. It's strategic management." Dr. Shaw listened carefully to both sides before addressing the board members. "This appears to go beyond a simple personality conflict," he observed. "The documentation Sherry has provided raises serious questions about leadership practices." Amanda's expression hardened. "If the board no longer has confidence in my leadership, perhaps I should resign." Her tone suggested she expected immediate reassurances that no such action was necessary. Instead, Dr. Shaw simply nodded. "That may become necessary, but first we need a formal investigation into these allegations. Effective immediately, Amanda will have no direct supervisory responsibilities over Sherry or any related projects until this matter is resolved." The color drained from Amanda's face as she realized her threat had backfired. "This is completely unnecessary," she protested. "A full investigation will distract from our mission and fundraising goals." "On the contrary," said Mrs. Harris, speaking for the first time, "as a major donor, I insist on knowing that the foundation operates with the integrity it claims to champion. An investigation serves the mission by ensuring our values are reflected in our leadership practices." As temporary arrangements were discussed, I felt oddly detached from the conversation. The confrontation had required every ounce of courage I possessed, and now that it was over, exhaustion began to set in. I had spoken my truth, presented my evidence, and now the outcome was in others' hands. When we returned to the gala, the atmosphere had transformed. Whispers followed both Amanda and me as we re-entered, separately. Dominic was deep in conversation with board members, his body language suggesting he was already distancing himself from Amanda's approaching downfall. Donors watched the dynamics with keen interest, clearly recognizing that a significant shift had occurred. The next morning, I arrived at work with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Despite the board's support the previous night, I had no idea what to expect. Would Amanda find ways to retaliate? Would colleagues who had witnessed my stand treat me differently? Amanda's behavior when others weren't present confirmed my fears. Passing me in an empty hallway, she leaned close to whisper, "Enjoy your moment. This isn't over." Her smile never reached her cold eyes. The subtle retaliation began immediately. Files I needed for meetings disappeared from shared drives. Emails with important information arrived after deadlines had passed. Meetings with my community partners were rescheduled without my knowledge. Meanwhile, Human Resources launched interviews with all staff about workplace culture. Tanya, from HR, previously so reluctant to address leadership concerns, now asked detailed questions about interactions with Amanda and documented everything carefully. Colleagues who had kept their distance began approaching me when Amanda wasn't around. "The same thing happened to me last year," a program coordinator confided. "She took credit for my veteran healthcare initiative, then criticized me publicly when I mentioned it in a team meeting." Within days, 5 more employees had shared similar experiences with investigators. A pattern emerged of targeting promising women, isolating them,
taking credit for their work, and eventually forcing them out through public humiliation or manufactured performance issues. Still, certain board members pressed for the matter to be handled quietly to avoid negative publicity. The foundation's reputation must be protected as an integrity-focused nonprofit, argued one trustee with ties to Amanda. Perhaps a confidential separation agreement would be best for all parties. The stress manifested physically. I lost 7 pounds in 2 weeks. Headaches became constant companions. Anxiety attacks struck without warning, leaving me gasping for breath in bathroom stalls or empty conference rooms. Through it all, Jordan remained a steady presence, running interference when possible and sharing information about the investigation's progress. "The board is divided," he told me during a coffee break. "Some want Amanda gone immediately. Others are worried about donor relationships. It's getting political." Finding support beyond the foundation walls proved crucial to my survival during this period. Grace organized a lunch meeting with 3 other former employees who had experienced Amanda's abuse of power. The 5 of us gathered at a restaurant far from the foundation offices, sharing stories that were remarkably similar in pattern, if different in detail. She told donors my community education program was conceptually flawed, after presenting my exact proposal as her own idea 3 weeks earlier, said Andrea Thompson, who had left 18 months earlier. When I questioned why my name was removed from the annual report for a project I designed, she told the team I was stealing credit for collaborative work, added Melissa Chen. We created an informal support group, meeting weekly to share updates and provide emotional encouragement. The validation of hearing others describe identical tactics helped me trust my own perceptions after months of gaslighting. Current employees began approaching me discreetly, sharing their own stories. Some were too afraid to speak officially to investigators, but wanted me to know I wasn't alone. We established an anonymous email account where they could submit experiences without fear of retaliation. Through these connections, I uncovered more about Amanda's history at her previous organizations. The same patterns of behavior had been hidden beneath confidentiality agreements and glowing public references, which allowed her to keep advancing while leaving damage behind. The relief of finally being believed after months of self-doubt was profound. I began sleeping better, though the workplace atmosphere stayed tense. I set clear boundaries, documented every interaction with Amanda, and included witnesses whenever possible. 3 weeks after the gala confrontation, the board called a special meeting.
The external investigation revealed misconduct even more extensive than I had imagined. A financial audit also uncovered discrepancies in expense reports and donor fund allocations, raising serious ethical concerns. Amanda was placed on administrative leave while further investigations continued. The press soon began asking questions, forcing the foundation to release carefully worded statements about leadership changes and renewed commitment to core values. Sensing the shift, Dominic suddenly claimed he had always been concerned about Amanda's management style. "I tried to shield the team from the worst of it," he insisted, despite his former position as her favorite contradicting this sudden change of narrative. I refused to join in gossip or celebrate Amanda's downfall. I felt no joy, only relief that the truth had finally come out. My goal had never been revenge, but justice, not only for myself, but for everyone affected by her abuse of power. The foundation began crafting public relations messages about organizational changes and commitment to its mission. Behind the scenes, however, major donors requested meetings directly with me to discuss community impact programs. "We were impressed by your integrity," Mrs. Blackwell told me during one such meeting. "It's refreshing to see someone stand up for the actual work instead of personal advancement." Senator Williams echoed the sentiment. "The healthcare access statistics you mentioned, the ones removed from the presentation, those are exactly the outcomes we need to see to justify continued public-private partnerships." Slowly, the foundation began the hard process of rebuilding its culture after years of toxic leadership. The road ahead was challenging, but for the first time in months, I felt hopeful about the future, for the organization, and for myself.
The weeks following Amanda's administrative leave brought unexpected challenges. Although the immediate threat was gone, I struggled with delayed emotional reactions from months of psychological abuse. Nightmares of public humiliation woke me in cold sweats. Innocent questions from colleagues triggered disproportionate anxiety as my mind remained locked in survival mode. What you experienced was workplace trauma, explained Dr. Ramirez, a therapist specializing in workplace bullying, recommended by Grace. Your brain and body stayed in survival mode under prolonged stress. Now that you're safer, your system is processing everything that happened. Our weekly sessions became a lifeline. As I learned to recognize the lasting effects of gaslighting, I saw how deeply Amanda's manipulation had undermined my ability to trust my own perceptions. Write down what you know to be true, Dr. Ramirez advised. When doubt creeps in, return to those statements as anchors. My journal filled with simple affirmations. My work on the Southside Clinic initiative was innovative and effective. I accurately remember the timeline of the federal grant proposal. My concerns about credit allocation were legitimate. Over time, revisiting these statements helped me rebuild self-trust. Gradually, the physical symptoms eased as I practiced stress management techniques. Sleep improved first, followed by the fading of persistent headaches. My appetite returned, and I regained the weight I had lost during my overwhelming work schedule. Reconnecting with friends I had neglected during my overwhelming work schedule added another layer of healing. When my college roommate Lisa visited from Milwaukee, she was shocked at how withdrawn I had become. The Sherry I know wouldn't let anyone make her doubt herself, she said during a long walk along Lake Michigan. That confidence is still in you. It was just buried for a while. Her words struck deeply. The confident, idealistic woman that had joined the Wellness Foundation 3 years earlier had been dismantled, but not destroyed. The pieces were still there, waiting to be reassembled, perhaps stronger than before. Small victories accumulated, contributing in meetings without second-guessing every word, making decisions without paralyzing anxiety, recognizing manipulative tactics in other relationships, and setting boundaries. Each success built on the last, gradually restoring my professional confidence. Meanwhile, the foundation underwent its own transformation. With Amanda negotiating her resignation, the board asked me to temporarily lead the Community Outreach Division, the very area where my work had been repeatedly stolen. This unexpected opportunity allowed me to develop my authentic leadership style. Where Amanda fostered competition, I encouraged collaboration. Where she hoarded information, I practiced transparency. Where she stole credit, I made sure every team member received recognition. I want to try something different for our next presentation, I told my team during our first strategy session. Let's create a slide acknowledging every contributor, no matter their role. Everyone deserves recognition for their part in our success. The surprise on their faces showed how deeply they had adapted to the previous culture of individual credit-taking. The relief that followed revealed how much they had wanted a different approach. We implemented new communication protocols, documenting roles and contributions from start to finish. Team meetings included time to highlight colleagues' efforts, not just individual achievements. Evaluation metrics expanded to measure collaboration and support for others' growth. Community partners responded positively to this shift. Organizations that had grown wary of the foundation's self-promotional style now embraced genuine partnerships. The Southside Clinic program expanded into 3 more neighborhoods, serving thousands of families with preventative care. The Healthcare Access Initiative, now properly credited to its original team, earned recognition from the State Medical Association for innovation in reaching underserved populations. When my name was announced at the award ceremony, Jordan led the standing ovation from our table. My relationship with the board shifted to one based on mutual respect rather than intimidation. Dr. Shaw, once skeptical of my accusations, became an ally in cultural reform. I owe you an apology, he told me during a candid conversation 6 months after the gala. I should have recognized the pattern sooner. Sometimes those of us in authority grow too comfortable with the status quo to see abuse of power happening right in front of us. As the 1-year mark of Amanda's departure approached, I faced a decision about my future.
The foundation offered me a permanent director role with significant influence over program direction. Meanwhile, Senator Williams had invited me to join her Healthcare Accessibility Commission, working on policy at the state level. The choice required deep reflection on what I had learned through this painful journey. What kind of leader did I want to become? Where could I make the most meaningful impact? And what environment would best support my continued growth and healing? Whatever path I chose, I was determined to create lasting change from my experience. Working with HR, I helped develop comprehensive anti-bullying policies with real accountability measures. We introduced an anonymous reporting system for workplace concerns, paired with transparent investigation procedures. A mentoring program was established with clear boundaries and oversight, ensuring power dynamics couldn't be exploited under the guise of professional development. Each mentee had multiple mentors, preventing the isolation that had left Amanda's victims so vulnerable. Perhaps most meaningful was leading a workshop on recognizing gaslighting and manipulation in professional settings. Initially planned for staff only, the session generated so much interest that it was open to partner organizations across Chicago's nonprofit sector. What you've experienced isn't unique to our foundation, I told attendees, but how we respond to it can be unique, and that response can transform organizational culture across our sector. Former victims became allies in this work, with Grace returning as a consultant on ethical leadership practices. Together, we built frameworks to ensure proper credit attribution and to create psychologically safe workspaces where concerns could be raised without fear of retaliation. The workplace culture gradually transformed. Staff retention improved dramatically. Exit interviews, once filled with vague euphemisms about seeking other opportunities, now reported high job satisfaction and healthy team dynamics. The foundation began attracting talented professionals specifically because of its reputation for ethical leadership. As the anniversary of the confrontation approached, I reflected on the profound changes of the past year. The people-pleaser who had endured months of abuse just to maintain approval had become an advocate for herself and others. The professional who once doubted her own memory and perceptions now trusted her judgment enough to guide organizational strategy. Amanda eventually resigned from the foundation and left the nonprofit sector altogether. I later heard she had moved to another state to work in corporate consulting. The news brought neither satisfaction nor regret, only a quiet hope that her patterns wouldn't continue in her new environment. The foundation went on to achieve record fundraising under our new collaborative leadership model, surpassing $6 million for the first time in its history. Donors specifically cited improved community relationships and transparent impact reporting as reasons for their increased support. Your programs are making measurable differences in healthcare accessibility, Mrs. Blackwell told me during a visit to our newest clinic. That's what philanthropy should be about, not ego or power games, but real, positive change in people's lives. The most profound personal changes weren't visible on organizational charts or fundraising reports. They lived in the way I approached relationships, in my refusal to diminish myself for others' comfort, and in the boundaries I maintained without apology. The experience had forced me to confront my people-pleasing tendencies and develop a stronger sense of self-worth independent of external approval. The irony, I told Dr. Ramirez during one of our final sessions, is that Amanda's attempt to silence me ultimately gave me a more powerful voice than I might have found otherwise. "That's often how it works," she replied with a knowing smile. "Our greatest growth comes through our most difficult challenges, though that never justifies the harm done." Her words resonated deeply. The experience had been painful, even traumatic, but also transformative. I had discovered strength I never knew I possessed, and found purpose in creating environments where others could thrive without fear of harm. The shame Amanda tried to place on me that night at the gala had ultimately returned to its rightful owner. In speaking truth to power, I learned that shame never belongs to those who are abused, but to those who abuse power. Not to those who speak up, but to those who try to silence others. Not to those who stand in their truth, but to those who manipulate and distort reality for personal gain. 1 year after that fateful confrontation,
I stood once again in the Lakeside Hotel ballroom, this time at the podium, addressing donors and community partners as a recognized leader rather than a silenced subordinate. Looking out at faces both familiar and new, I felt neither triumph nor bitterness, but profound gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. Our foundation's work continues to evolve, just as we grow through challenges. The measure of our success isn't in awards or recognition, but in the lives improved through healthcare access, the communities strengthened through collaboration, and the culture of integrity we build together. Have you ever stood up to someone who tried to diminish you? How did finding your voice change your life? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that their truth matters. Remember, the shame never belongs to those who speak truth to power. It belongs to those who abuse that power. Not to those who speak up, but to those who tried to silence others. Not to those who stand in their truth, but to those who manipulate and distort reality for personal gain.